So Laurence, how are you? Welcome to the Coach Training EDU podcast.
Thank you very much. I'm great.
Flourish. Let me give you a little introduction. So Laurence has been a coach. He is a graduate of Coach Training EDU. He's been coaching since 2007, an Agile and Executive Coach with IBM since 2015. And you've worked with digital technology teams.
Yeah, that's most of my experience. I'm sorry?
Yeah. An alum of NYU?
Yes, I am, for my master's. I am, yeah. Yes, Tisch, part of Tisch. I'm a Tisch alum.
And as I knew you, because I was one of your trainers through this process.
Right, for 2.0.
I knew you as someone who worked as a coach in-house in IBM.
Right, yeah.
And it just was impressive to hear what you would bring back from your experience at IBM and how it interacted with executive coaching. I'm excited, and we'll have a chance to chat and see where we go and get more of your story and go from there. So Laurence, how's it going? How's life? This is week 20 now. This,
is it week 20? No, it's not week 20. That would be almost
week 8 or 9,
something like the 10. I've been in lockdown. It was funny because I was in Budapest when this all started happening, and then like the day that I got back, or the next day, literally the next day, we started lockdown. So I got back in a nick of time from Europe. I was in Europe doing leadership workshops. So
could have been stuck in Turkey.
Why Turkey? I was in
Budapest, right?
No, Budapest is Hungary.
Oh, Hungary. I'm thinking like Turkey, Hungary. It's like Thanksgiving feast in my head right now.
They're close though. Hungary and Turkey are close. And I've been to Turkey as well. Wouldn't be a bad place to be locked down, actually.
Right?
Or Antalya on the coast.
There's someone I'm working with on who's formatting our books, all the 1.0s and 2.0s. He's in Latvia, and it's fascinating to hear his story, like what's going on with them and where they're at. Like they did not get hit with it. It was amazing. Like,
yeah, well,
very lucky. Yeah.
How many people are going to Latvia? That's why.
Well, you're in the epicenter. You're in the city. What's it like in the city? Like you're in the heart of the heat.
Yeah, pandemic central, New York City. It's actually getting a lot better than it was. It was very strange when the whole thing first happened and we first went into lockdown. It was like something out of I Am Legend, or a movie like that, where the streets were empty, no cars, no people, all the stores were closed. It was very, very strange. But now the city still it has a pulse again. It's not quite open. The stores and everything are still closed. But you see more people on the street, you see more cars now. So it's very slowly coming back. But I don't know, it's been fine for me. I've been doing things like for example, and I advise this in my resilience workshops that I'm doing at IBM is, what are the things that you used to love doing before the pandemic? For me, I loved going to art museums and art galleries. So what I've been doing is finding art galleries or art museums that are offering virtual tours, and that's been very cool actually. And I've really loved that.
Favorite museum in New York? What's your favorite art museum in New York?
Favorite art museum? God, it's hard to pick because I love the Met. But I love modern art. As you can see, this is a painting I've done myself there. And so I love MoMA for modern art, as well as the Whitney. I don't know, I can't pick.
My favorite piece then, or if you had an afternoon, what's your favorite? Yeah.
Well, it would have to be outside of New York, I think. My favorite artist is Van Gogh. So, so it would have to be probably. Yeah, the Musée d'Orsay has a lot of Van Gogh a lot of pieces that I really love. So, yeah.
I love the museums in New York so much. I have so many fond memories of days just spent wandering the Met.
Yeah, I used to do that, pretty much every weekend some kind of museum, whether it's art or the Natural History Museum or something. The New York Historical Society is a great one. That's the oldest one, actually, in New York City. Yeah, it's a great place for culture.
Just throw on the head, like when I travel, I just throw on the headphones, listen to some, I don't know, Chopin, and then just totally geek out. Like that's the level of geekiness that I'll get to.
Yeah, it's great. It's great for that. So I've been doing things like that, or like, for example, I love going to new restaurants. Every weekend I would go to a new sort of, anticipated restaurant. And so instead of doing that now, a lot of the higher end restaurants are delivering. So I'm doing some research, finding the ones that I liked and having them deliver. And it's been great. I've been making my own cocktails because I love going to cocktail bars. But so now I've been making them at home. It's funny, only essential businesses are open, like, obviously hospitals and supermarkets and things like that. And liquor stores are considered an essential business, and they're all open. So
true. So what's it like? So the company with like IBM, like you're coaching, they went through a massive shift. What was it like for them going through this massive shift? And how does it, like, what are you seeing in terms of the resilience models that you've been working with?
So it's interesting. It's a massive shift from one perspective, but from another perspective, it kind of plays into IBM sweet spot, at the very same time. So like what I mean by that is, we have to, it's a shift in as much as we have to change the way we engage with our customers. And obviously we have to change the way we work internally. We have to change the way we interact internally as well. But it plays into our sweet spot though at the same time, because one of our major strategic initiatives is cloud computing. And this is a sort of unfortunately the penultimate use case of cloud computing right now, right? And so IBM has been able to really leverage that, both in commercial ways, but also in philanthropic ways, donating computing power. Like for example, we've developed a quantum computer, which it's a rarity in the world, but where we've donated it to research organizations, research institutes, to help find a vaccine. And so various research institutes have been doing that. And what that has helped them do is to greatly compress the amount of time it would take to run the data, run the numbers, and come up with results. What would have taken them literally months to even in some cases years is now taking them a matter of hours or days. The other thing that we're donating is Watson, our AI, which is able to go through data and identify patterns, and identify sort of paths that scientists can follow that have a greater chance of success than other paths. If a researcher is presented with 100 different possible paths to try to follow toward a vaccine, which one is the most likely one to yield results? Watson can help out with that.
That's incredible. That's so. This is next level. We're in a whole new world type of conversation, talking about quantum, right. Quantum. Like that's. I know a little bit about it just from the TED Talks I've watched on quantum computing.
But you'll hear it, I'm sure you've heard in the news how, a lot of the scientists and researchers will say, well, it generally takes, traditionally, it takes about 10 years from when you first start research toward a vaccine till you get the vaccine on the shelves, right? And now we're talking about getting vaccines on the shelves by the end of the year, or even, the first few months of next year. So literally months, less than a year. And the reason for that is this tech that we're now bringing to the forefront, and also just changing the way researchers are working. Before they didn't have to change, right? 10 years was the accepted time frame. That was the industry standard. There was no reason to change. And so why change the way we think about problems? Why change the way we approach our work when this is the industry standard? Now we're saying the industry standard is not good enough. We need to come up with new, better ways of thinking. We need to expand the way our thinking around how we do things. And I think that's why you're seeing this compression of those timeframes, the tech, as well as the ability to change, the growth mindset at its finest.
Yeah, and like it plays into resilience theory, where resilience requires a challenge to move forward. Where
Right.
this is everyone right now is presented with a very similar challenge point. How is this is the opportunity to take the leap forward. Like if you need an excuse, you got it. You have a green light to make a pivot, and that's the word of 2020, right? Pivot.
Right.
How has this shifted, if anything, or how has your coaching come to play in, let's say, the last couple months?
So, wow, in a number of ways. So I'm, in addition to being an executive coach, I'm also an Agile coach.
Mm-hmm.
And what I've been doing a lot in my executive coaching is introducing a lot more Agile coaching techniques, a lot more Agile coaching concepts. And the reason is that people, they need to shift how they're working. They need to, for example, they need to be able to get something out the door, like some kind of a solution, whatever they're working on, a lot more quickly than they were before. Well, how can you do that? Well, first you need to establish what is that minimum viable piece of value for whatever it is that you're going to be creating. How do you just get that minimum viable product or service out the door as quickly as possible, as opposed to let's spend 6 months or 3 months, whatever the time frame is, to plan around this, and then get everything right, and then work, and then at the end of maybe 6 months to a year, we'll have that product out the door and it's going to be perfect. What the Agile approach says is, no, we want to be able, first and foremost, everything that we think is right about what it is we're producing is a hypothesis. And it's only until it's consumed by our customers do we know if it was the right thing or not. So our customers will tell us, yep, this is great, we want more, and then we'll iteratively build on what we produced. Or our customers will say, no, this is not what we want, what we need, and we have to start again and try a different iteration of what we were working on. And that idea, that concept, I take into my executive coaching as well. What are you going to, I say to my clients, what are you going to try toward achieving this goal? What are we going to do between today and our next session? What are you going, what is that attempt going to be to iterate on that goal that you're looking to achieve? And by doing that, we can, the client can start making progress almost immediately toward that goal. Maybe not achieve the whole thing, but between, in the 1 week or the 2 weeks between sessions, they'll come back with something in hand that they have made progress toward.
So it's just a matter of just getting them to start and complete, just turn in the assignment, basically.
Get a C.
You're saying just get a C. We're aiming for a C. Is that the mindset, or is it more like, if you were to?
I wouldn't even say just start or just get a C. What I would say is achieve a piece of it. What is one? You've got this goal, whatever that goal is. I don't know. I want to be a VP. I want to become a VP. What is one step toward becoming a VP? Well, I really don't have. I'm terrible at delegation. Okay, so between now and 2 weeks from now, when we meet again, what is one skill you're going to have built toward delegating? And then we come back and we bring that into the coaching session, and we iterate on it right then and there, and then either they build on that skill or they start working on a different skill if they're at a comfortable place with that. Yeah,
that makes sense. That makes sense.
yeah. And so, and when you think of that in terms of COVID, wow, you really can start addressing some of these issues around COVID, because this is the other thing I talk about in my resiliency, my resilience workshop, is that a lot of the stress that people feel, a lot of the anxiety, is because they think of, oh my God, the pandemic, oh my God, COVID. But what does that mean exactly? For each of us, it means different things. It means a set of different things. Some people have bigger sets of things than other people. So that means that I have to, in addition to doing my work, I've got to deal with my kids being at home. Okay, so what does that mean exactly? If we were to break that down, what does that mean? Well, they need to be fed, and they need to be dressed, and they need to be entertained, and they need to be educated. Okay, so now let's break that down and come up with a system to address that. And all of a sudden, it's not, oh my God, the pandemic. It's this problem that I can address. I have the power to control this, and this is the way I will control it. It's that I have to self-isolate, right? Well, what does that mean? Well, I can't go to museums anymore. Okay, how do we deal with that? Well, I'm going to do virtual tours of museums, and that's one way I can regain control of that aspect of my life. And when you break it down into those things, what you see is you're getting more and more control over the situation, and less stress and anxiety.
You're such an optimist, Laurence. I wish I could just have that little optimism bubble, that burst of optimism throughout. That's, yeah. I mean, wow. Yes.
So let me tell you something I've been struggling with. I'd love to hear your ideas around this, John. So I started doing, so again, for being agile, I iterate on my own ideas and my own, approaches to coaching. And I was doing the resilience workshop, and I was kicking it off by saying, I want you to imagine it's the end of the pandemic. The pandemic is behind us. It's 6 months from now. It's a year from now, whatever that is. Describe your life now. Now that you're able to do the things that you love, tell me the things that you love to do. And it is helpful, and I think that's a good approach. But then I started thinking, if I say to people, well, think about 6 months from, and now 6 months has passed and it's not over, or you're trying to do this visioning exercise and you're thinking to yourself, it's not going to be over in 6 months. How do you deal with that? And then what I thought was, well, maybe it's not about envisioning that it's over. Maybe it's about, how do we make our lives better right now? How do we, instead of saying this is not normal, that was normal, and I miss that, which is what we do. We're grieving, right? We're grieving about what we no longer have, that life that we no longer have. So rather than saying, sort of continuing the grieving process, which is what I felt like I was doing, I say, okay, let's imagine that this is normal. Let's say that this is just the way it's going to be from now on. How do we, how do we become happy? How do we become fulfilled? How do we thrive in this environment? What are those things we need to do? And I tried coaching around that as well. So I've been doing some A/B testing, as we call it. What do you think?
Yeah, when the research is interesting on future self. So essentially what you're doing is you're doing an intermediate future self, not like the 10-year, but more the 6 month. And what I find, what I love about the future self is it's not as much that the idea of ourselves in the future that we envision that needs to come true in order for us to feel fulfilled or happy. It's that everyone having a positive idea of who you are becoming,
right,
and feeling connected to that person are signs of high resilience. So people who have a hard time thinking of themselves 6 months to 10 years in the future, and have a hard time of, liking that image in their mind, or feeling like they're not connected to that. Like, oh, it doesn't matter what I do. It doesn't, whatever. Right. Those are signs of not as resilient and not,
Right.
the long-term decision making. So it's almost like the futuring of our, like when we future in our like future tense in our minds, that's helpful. That is healthy. That is, we need hope. It's essentially hope.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And if we have low hope, then motivation goes down, and
Right.
we start to rely on other systems in our bodies to get us back to where we need to go.
Right, right.
Which
Yeah.
might not be healthy or unhealthy, like
Yeah.
lots of escape.
Yes.
Liquor stores
Yes.
are open for this. There's a reason why liquor stores are open during. So you get the idea of what's going on in this, and so I think that to me is the interesting fact. I mean, that's the interesting thing. So like when you look at, so let's get your story a little bit, Laurence. I'd love to. So where did you grow up? How did it impact you? And how did you decide to take the career path you chose? Yeah.
So I grew up in. So let me first frame it with I'm a third generation New Yorker. My great grandparents, it was the typical sort of immigrant Ellis Island story. My great grandparents came here from Italy in 1902 and settled in Hell's Kitchen, the Hell's Kitchen neighborhood of Manhattan. So I grew up, and I was always being shuttled back and forth between there and New Jersey. So I kind of grew up in both places. At the age of 10, I discovered filmmaking, and I loved filmmaking. And that was my first career, was in film and television production. That led, and I always say it was funny. I just had a conversation with my son about this, and because he was like, "Well, you've had several careers." I was like, "Well, actually, I've had one career, but it evolved over time, and that is truly how I see it. Is that I started in film and television as my career. That evolved into digital media." When the web came along, I actually started in interactive television, which turned into the web, which then turned into the web and mobile applications. And so my career, evolved, along those fronts. And I became an Agile coach first, and then I became very interested in executive coaching. And so the Agile coaching led to the executive coaching. The digital media led to me doing Agile coaching. And that's how I got to where I am now. But there's a direct line that connects all of those careers. What else? So I went to school, undergraduate, School of Visual Arts in New York City for film and television. That's what led to my first career. And then, as I mentioned, I went to NYU for Interactive Telecommunications, actually. And now, I also have a love of learning. So I'm always immersed in mostly things about, psychology or coaching. I just got a couple of months ago, I guess now, certification in cognitive behavioral therapy from Massachusetts General Hospital, which is part of Harvard in Cambridge, and that was very cool because it was the program is intended for psychotherapists, and so the training is exactly the training a therapist would get. I obviously I cannot market myself or present myself as a therapist, and I make it clear to my clients that I'm not a therapist because I'm not licensed. However, the training and the techniques are the same as far as CBT goes. And so I am a cognitive behavioral coach is what I call it. And I use those techniques with a lot of clients. I have clients which are just full-on CBT clients, and it's amazing. It's opened up my abilities to, the way I think about coaching, the way I think about what a lot of my clients are telling me. Even if I don't take a CBT approach with a client, I still can see glimmers of it in a lot of things, a lot of the ways my clients are thinking and they're behaving. And for other clients, it is the approach that works for them. And I've had amazing results with it. It's very exciting.
what do you see as the similarities between CBT and coaching?
Well, it's funny. I don't know if similar. It's like coaching. Like for example, the curriculum that's taught at Coach Training EDU incorporates some CBT techniques. And I'll give you an example. And funny, I just had a conversation with Brian Hart about this, and he said, "Oh, that was John's idea." And so maybe you didn't realize you were using a CBT technique, but one technique that has really worked for my clients, they really resonate with this, is, I don't know what you'd call it, what the name is now, but it's when, to address negative thoughts, like intrusive negative thoughts, that you hear that thought through a cartoon character's voice.
Right.
Did you had this idea?
Well, it was the inner critic, right? So the inner critic
Yeah.
is a well-known exercise,
Right.
Like let's say from, I don't know, like Taming Your Gremlin, I think is the way I was introduced to it when I was coach trained. But the idea of transforming it into a cartoon character, that came out of necessity because I was working with high school students.
Oh, I see. It works with adults too.
Right. And like coming up with a crazy, mean, ugly inner critic and then saying, "Oh, what did you do with John today? Oh, well, guess what, Mom? I made a really mean, scary demon that tells me mean things in my head." Like, "Oh, that's fantastic." And you know what I mean? Like, so it came out of the necessity of, okay, I get it. We're having little funny cartoon characters now act as inner critics. Yeah, right. That was the evolution. So CBT says, they say cartoons are good.
Well, they don't say use cartoon characters.
They're into cartoon characters. No.
By the way, I will tell you, I had one client where this worked like a charm, where every time he heard a lot of negative thoughts. Every time he heard a negative thought, he heard it in the voice of Skeletor from Masters of the Universe.
Right on. Right on.
No, but what one of the things that you try to get your clients to do is, when they have these negative thoughts, that they're able to disconnect themselves from the thought, so that they can look at the thought, examine the thought, understand that this is an irrational thought, and what is the rational, what is the rational thought that should replace this thought. And so that's what the cartoon character does. It's a mechanism that you can use for that disconnection, so that it's no longer you, it's Skeletor, for example, that's saying this.
I mean, it's just creating distance, right? Similar to like the future self, you're creating a tool, a handle to grab the idea, grab the emotion, and be able to move it in different spots.
Right, that's right.
You're no longer, it no longer operates like it's in control of you. You're, get back to this theme of control, controlling the thoughts and where we're at.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, exactly.
So what is the coaching culture like at an organization like IBM? Like when you say, okay, great, like you're going to work with a coach and you're someone at IBM, is that generally like a woohoo, yes, I get to work with a coach? Or is it, oh, really? I don't have a lot of time on my schedule. Like, what's the temperature like, and how do they package it? Like, yeah, what's it like being an executive coach in that culture?
I mean, it really depends. As an Agile coach, for example, I used to, it's funny because it's changed, and it's a reflection of the change in the culture, which is great. But when I first started at IBM, there was a lot of resistance to Agile. And so, the fact that you had to speak to an Agile coach, and an Agile coach was going to come in and start working with your team, was like, because it meant that it was going to hurt because you were going to have to change, the way you were doing things. And you're not just the way you were behaving, but the way you were thinking. You were going to have to change your mindset, adopt an Agile mindset. And it was really funny, actually, talking about CBT. I was managing a team of coaches at IBM early on, and I made the realization, and I said to the team, I was like, I just realized we're not coaches, we're cognitive behavioral therapists, because CBT therapists, what they attempt to do is to take a client's negative behaviors, negative thoughts and behaviors, and substitute those for positive thoughts and behaviors. And that's exactly what we're doing. We're trying to take the current behaviors, which we see as not being as productive as they could be, to more agile thoughts and behaviors. And when I made that realization, boom, that changed how I thought and how I addressed the teams. And I'll give you an example. Like when I first started at IBM, I used to go and I was traveling around the world, and I'd be in, let's say Stockholm, and I'd be training teams in how to be agile. Over the course of 4 days, I'd do like a workshop of how to be agile. And then the idea was I would come back to New York, and on the very next Monday, I would start working with these teams, in coaching them to be agile. So we would start doing those agile things. And what I discovered was they retained almost none of the information that I had spent 4 days trying to sort of drive into their skulls. And I realized that it was just the wrong approach. And it was around the same time that I was thinking about like taking the CBT approach. And I just by chance, I was reading about philosophy and reading about Socrates. And I was like, wow, what if I took a Socratic approach instead? And I developed this approach where I would say there would be a team that was like, okay, Laurence, this is the team you're going to work with. I'd be great. And what I would do is I would send them information about, just references on how to work in an agile way, just links that were out on the web. And I'd say, read this and just do it. Do it for a month. Don't talk to me, just read this and do it for a month. Just follow the instructions like you're reading an instruction manual, and just do it. And a month later, I would then set up a workshop. And the workshop wasn't me pushing information. The workshop was me asking a lot of questions, saying, okay, guys, so tell me, what does it mean to be agile? Why is it important to be agile? Tell me, how do you plan your work in an agile way? How do you do sprint planning? And boom, they just got it. They would tell me the answers. And some of it was wrong, and some of the questions they asked was to fill in those gaps in their understanding. But by the end, between their learning, their experience, and then my coaching, they were off and running in a way that, and they had digested the information and the process, and I had successfully helped them to change their mindset because I wasn't even there. Because they just had to do it. They had to digest it for themselves. And then it was taking more of a, like I said, a Socratic, more of an executive coaching approach to then filling in those gaps and getting them to where they needed to be. That was the most effective way to train somebody. It was powerful. It was amazing.
Right. And it's spread out over time. Like you were using a drip system. It wasn't a compressed 4 days in an isolated environment, where you get drilled into this idea.
Right. Where these concepts were just completely non-contextual for them. Right. They were just academic concepts, which they didn't know what to do with. And then when it was time to do something with it, they had, number one, they couldn't remember most of it. And number two, they had no idea how to get started.
I mean, it's not implementing. You mean just like, here's the whole, it's like the whole book at once. Like I'm going to do one sitting rather than a integration into a life. I mean, I think that's, we've done the weekend thing too, where, we compress trainings in a weekend versus spread it out like once a week, 2 hours on a webinar. It's better. The webinar is more effective than in person.
Right.
To the degree that we stopped doing in person. Why? Why would we stop doing so? Like, why?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. No. So it's exciting. So I still now I take that approach. I also, so to answer your question, so a lot of people now I've kind of have built my own brand within IBM too. Right. So people often seek me out. Or I'll do a workshop, and I only do now like half-day workshops or one-day workshops. And people will ask me to become their executive coach after that workshop because they see value in it. I do have my first one. This is the first client I have. and I'm not revealing anything, but I had my first client that was actually referred to me by HR because of certain issues that they were having. And what's really interesting about, I expected that client to be very resistant. You know, like, I don't know why I'm here. And
Yeah.
yeah,
Like,
and,
of course.
and he wasn't like that at all. He was like, oh my God, I don't know why I'm here, but I want to understand why I'm here. And I want to be better. And that has been the approach. And that's been amazing. And he was the first client too, where we had a breakthrough during the designing the alliance session. So he was primed for change.
I love that. That is so cool. That is
Yeah,
so
it was very cool.
I mean, it's amazing to see like how assumptions can be so off. You know, they can just,
So
go.
I can give you a little bit of info. It was really interesting. So he came to me and he was like, I've had a lot of complaints about my tone of voice, the tone that I use with people. You know, people find it very disrespectful and condescending. And so, what I'm really going to need help with from you is working on my tone. And the first question I asked was, how does your tone of voice reflect the disrespect you have for that person? And it was like, boom, it like blew up his head. He's like, you're right. And I was like, and then I said, tell me about the situation. Tell me about what led up to you. Tell me what you said and tell me what led up to it. And then he told me, and then I was like, let's break it down. This person said this to you. What was the very first thing that entered your head? The very first thought. And he, without thinking, he just said, well, that was stupid. And I said, that's what that person heard. That's what the person heard when you said, well, tell me more about that. Or, whatever that next thing was that he said. She didn't hear those words. She heard, well, that was stupid. And it was mind blowing for him. And it was a great start to the engagement.
You know what? I mean, this crystallizes a lot of what coaching's about, or all of these helping therapies are really about. It's pinpointing, raising an awareness of what's happening, and then pointing out, okay, now let's do something different. Like, it's not rocket science; it's awareness science. It's like just an awareness of where you're at. And I think the two myths that it just demolishes, one is that like this typifies that people, the myth is that people don't want to change.
Yeah.
Right? Or they want to stay the same. They just want to.
Right.
No, only family members act like that to you. No one, you know what I mean? Outside of certain people.
That's only true of your drunk uncle.
Yeah. Like, there are some people, don't try to change, But I feel like that's what happened. Like, then everyone thinks that's just how it is. Like, people, and there are some people who don't. Like, just like, well, he could have easily just been, you know what? This is who I am. I'm successful because of it. I have high standards. So what? Deal with it.
Right.
Right. But the vast majority of people want to change.
Yeah, they do. It's true. And even now, going back, I originally was saying how 5 years ago when I started at IBM and people were introduced to me as an Agile coach, they were like, oh my God. Now it's like, hey, can you come and help us, please? We want to be more agile, because now it's simply the way of being. It's the culture at IBM.
Yeah, and that's the second myth, is that it's going to be like that it's somehow painful, like that there's somehow the changes are going to be more painful than what's happening. But I think most of the pain of procrastination is in feeling the pain of being unproductive.
Right.
Once they get started, they realize, whoa, it's actually quite nice.
Yeah.
To be as productive as possible.
Right. Yeah.
So how can people connect with you? Let's say people want to say, I want to work with Laurence. Like, what's the best way for them to get connected with you and to learn more about what you do?
Well, I have a website, torchwoodcoaching.com. So you can just go there and there are multiple ways to connect with me there. I wanted to, So this was part of the sort of the pre-interview process. I was talking
Right.
about how I got the name Torchwood, um, and it's kind of an interesting story. So I was actually laid off from Viacom whenever it was. Yeah, I guess it was about 5 years ago, and I mean, it was a huge, massive layoff. They laid off like 2,000 people, um, but I got an amazing severance package. I had no complaints. I didn't have to immediately look for a job, and so I had time to really think about what I wanted to do. And um, and I had been coaching at Viacom. It wasn't at that point my primary responsibility, but it was a big part of what I did and how I did my job. Um, and and so I had a friend ask me at one point, so what is it that you'd really like to do if you had your dream job? And I said, without hesitation or even kidding, I said, I'd like to be the doctor.
Mm.
And what I meant by the doctor is the doctor as in Doctor Who. Because for me, the show it's not a show, it's a religion. The doctor is a role model for me, quite honestly and quite truthfully. He's a role model of how to live, of how to be. Um, and I said, yeah, I'd like to be the doctor. And she laughed. She said, no, really? I was like, no, really. I'd like a job where there's a problem to be solved. I'm sent in to solve that problem. I land in my TARDIS, which is the spaceship time machine, and I work with people to solve the problem, and then I get back into my TARDIS and I go off and I land somewhere else and I do the same thing, and that's my life and that's my job. Um, and sure enough, just probably is about 6 weeks later, I was offered the job at IBM to become a full-time coach, where that was my job pretty much to a T. Like I said, my original job was traveling around the world as an Agile coach, training IBMers on how to be more agile. And then back at home in New York, being an executive coach, although I would pick up coaching clients from around the world as well. I mean, executive coaching clients. And then I decided to start my own practice outside of IBM. So I have Torchwood Coaching, which is my private practice in the evenings. And if you were to take the word Torchwood and rearrange the letters, you would see that it would spell Doctor Who. So, yeah.
It's so rad. I know Jasmine was telling me about this. She's like, he's a really big fan, like mentioned in the podcast. But this might be the coolest specialty ever if you coach people who are into Doctor Who. Like
That would be cool.
That could work. That could work.
No. And so, John, I had an executive coaching client at IBM who was probably equal to me, a Doctor Who fan. And I would often use examples from episodes. Do you remember when this happened to the doctor? What's your takeaway from that? What would you learn from that? What would you do? And it really worked. The idea, another thing that I like to do, and I'm trying to expand on it now, is metaphor coaching, metaphor therapy, where you create metaphors that resonate with, or your client creates metaphors that represents thoughts, behaviors, or ways of being, ways that they would like to be, and then you work toward that metaphor. It's powerful stuff, and that's kind of what I was doing.
It goes back to narrative therapy too. I mean, if we're all the creation of this concept that we have in our minds of ourselves, and we have control over the main character,
yeah,
why aren't we doing better with our main character?
Right.
How can you create, a strengths and weakness analysis that would actually, be put into production?
And when you have a strong character, like for example, for me, the doctor, it really does help with my resilience. Like what would the doctor do in this situation? Or I often ask the question, am I being the doctor now? And if the answer is no, then what do I need to change to be the doctor? Or you might see in the background,
I saw that. Yeah, I keep calling the doctor. I was like, yeah, Jasmine was filling me in. She's like, you got to do this. I have we have Bennett turns 1 in like a month. So for me, the idea of watching a program without like adult program, like that's a funny joke. It's like, yeah, I'll get there eventually. Like it's gonna be like 3 or 4 years. But I mean, it's a work. I mean, narrative therapy, metaphor, story. I mean, the inner critic in some ways is a metaphor, right?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah, of course.
same with future self. Like all of these constructs are what make human beings, that we're able to create them. Like it's necessary for mental health.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
It's really fun. Laurence, it's been a pleasure. It's been so fun just to chat, and I really appreciate your taking the time. I know how busy you are, especially now with everything. It feels like, I don't know about you, but it feels like the levels of productivity, but busyness have also oddly gone up, but there's more at the same time. It's like we've entered this weird time warp where a day feels like a week. And
It's true.
wow.
Yeah, I'm exhausted at the end of the day.
Right. I feel like there's a collective, like, and I don't know, collective
Fatigue.
something. People are shorter, not as, a little snippy. It's like, come on, everyone just needs to give a big collective societal hug.
Yeah, that's
but from a safe distance, But I appreciate this. It's been super fun. And I really like I feel like it warms my heart to know that there are people like you in this world doing the work that you're doing in places that you're doing it, and having the impact that you're having. It's like, yeah, coaching is like Viva la Revolution coaching, like it's happening, in all these different places. Yes. So,
yeah. Thank you, John. I this was a lot of fun. I loved it. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Absolutely. We'll see if we do more of these, and this will be available for recording, which is now on iTunes and the Coach Train EDU blog. So if you want to go check out the Coach Train EDU blog to get more, Laurence, let's do that. Thank you, community. Thank you, Coach Train EDUers, and I will see you next Tuesday.
Bye.
Bye, Laurence.
Bye.